Okay, imagine this. A disease that just appears out of nowhere, traps hundreds of thousands of people inside their own bodies, and then, poof, vanishes without a trace. This sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? Well, it's not. This is the real story of one of the 20th century's most bizarre and unsettling medical mysteries, encephalitis lethargica. And you've got to understand, this wasn't like being in a coma. The victims were completely awake. Their minds were 100% active. They could hear their loved ones talking to them. They could feel a touch on their arm, but they were absolutely powerless to respond. They were, for all intents and purposes, living statues. For a little over a decade, this sleeping sickness was a global terror. And then, just as suddenly and as weirdly as it showed up, it was gone. The entire epidemic just stopped. It left behind this trail of absolute devastation and a mystery that, honestly, we're still grappling with today. So our story starts back in Vienna in 1917, right in the middle of the chaos of World War I. There was a neurologist, a guy named Konstantin von Economo, and he started seeing patients with this incredibly strange and frightening set of symptoms he had never, ever seen before. Von Economo is the one who gave the condition its name, encephalitis, which just means inflammation of the brain, and lethargica, for that deep, almost death-like sleepiness it caused. Patients would get a really high fever and feel just overwhelmingly tired before sinking into the state of complete, unbreakable stillness. I mean, it's just so chilling to think about. A patient could be sitting motionless in a chair for hours, not even blinking, but their eyes would follow you as you walked across the room. They heard every single word. They understood everything, but they were just trapped behind this invisible wall, totally unable to move a muscle. And what started in Vienna, well, it didn't stay there for long. Within months, cases were popping up in France and England. By 1919, it had crossed the ocean, and it had become this full-blown epidemic tearing across North America, Europe, and even as far as India. And here's where the story gets even stranger, if you can believe it. Not everyone who got sick became frozen. Some patients developed the complete opposite set of symptoms. They went into a manic state. They couldn't stop moving. They could talk constantly. Their arms and legs just in perpetual motion for days at a time until they literally collapsed from pure exhaustion. So how could one single disease cause such wildly different effects? This one anecdote from New York just really brings home how bizarre this all was. Can you imagine that? Being frozen mid-action, like one arm up, fingers out, ready to grab your coat, and then staying in that exact pose for half a year? It's truly the stuff of nightmares. So, faced with this terrifying, unpredictable plague, you can bet the world's best medical minds were scrambling for an answer. But they were totally helpless. Every single path they went down, every investigation, it just led to a dead end. And they looked for everything you could possibly imagine. Was it some new kind of bacteria? Nope. An unknown virus? Couldn't find one. Maybe an environmental poison or toxin? Nothing. A genetic thing passed down through families? Ruled it out. Every single theory just fizzled. They found absolutely nothing. And listen, this wasn't some small, rare thing. We are talking about 500,000 people affected across the entire globe. About a third of them died in that initial acute phase of the illness. And for many of those who survived, an even more terrible fate was waiting. Yeah, for so many of the survivors, the horror came back years later. They started to develop this severe, progressive condition that looked a lot like Parkinson's disease. It slowly encased them back in that frozen state. Only this time, there was no waking up. They were trapped for good. But the story doesn't actually end there. We jump forward a few decades to 1969. A young neurologist named Oliver Sacks, he starts working at a hospital in New York with a group of these post-encephalitic survivors, people who had been stuck in institutions for decades. I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. More than 40 years. These patients had been living in this silent, motionless world since the 1920s. An entire lifetime had just passed them by while they were locked inside their own heads. So Sachs decides to try this experimental new drug called L-Dopa. And what happened next was, well, it was both a miracle and a complete tragedy. The drug worked. The frozen patients started to wake up. They could talk, they could move, they could connect with the world again. But the awakening didn't last. As the drug's effects started to wear off, they tragically relapsed, freezing right back up again. And you can only imagine the profound confusion they must have felt. They woke up as if no time had passed at all. In their minds, it was still the roaring 20s. They were asking for their parents, their spouses, their friends, people who had been gone for decades. They were waking up to a world that was completely alien to them. So, fast forward to today. After a whole century, are we any closer to figuring this thing out? Researchers are still wrestling with the exact same fundamental questions that stumped von Economo all the way back in 1917. Right now, there are three big theories on the table. One is that it was some kind of rare, bizarre autoimmune reaction that was triggered by the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. Another idea is that it was a completely separate ghost pathogen that just did its damage and then disappeared. And then there's the most unsettling theory, that whatever caused it is still out there, just lying dormant. In 2024, the National Institutes of Health wrapped up the most exhaustive study ever done on this disease. Their final official conclusion? The cause remains completely unknown. And that leads us to the most chilling question of all. If we don't know what it was or why it went away, then we have absolutely no way of knowing if it will ever come back. It's a true medical ghost story where the ghost might just be waiting in the wings.